Okay, we're about to get started. Thanks everyone for participating.
Lisa, just while we're waiting for people to join, I want to thank you again for inviting me. Obviously, these are very interesting times, and we're trying to all put our heads together to figure them out. And I'm sure everyone on this call has had many experiences, but I've been on like a board call and then had another CEO of mine call me while I was on that board call. And I know, actually it happened today. And so I know we're all kind of trying to help everyone the most we can. And, thank you again for the call and the opportunity here today.
Well, I mean, on behalf of all of us, we are very grateful that you, whom I know has been up day and night with the days blurring, the weeks blurring, has given us this time, and also really delighted to have you a member of Extraordinary Women on Boards as well.
Thank you.
So in the interest of just keeping things starting and ending on time as best we can, I am going to kick this off. I guess just from a ground rules perspective, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to introduce Deborah a little more formally. She is going to then take us through a presentation, and those slides will be shared later. In addition, there's going to be a replay, so and hopefully notes that follow. So if you have to drop off, you'll be able to pick up where you left off. And what we're going to do is take questions in the chat box. So if you're able to open the chat box and ask questions, there will be a Q&A session. Someone is asking me for a meeting password. Is anyone else, if you could just respond, well, I guess if you got into the chat, that's not a problem. All right. Give me 1 second to figure out the password issue.
I've got it, 514696.
Okay, 514696. Let me see if I can text that. Okay, sorry about that. All right, why don't we kick things off, and after Deborah's done with her presentation, we'll take your questions and we'll make sure to read them out in case you're on the phone. So welcome Extraordinary Women on Boards to our second virtual session. We are very honored to have Deborah Weinswig. Deborah and I met at a conference in May of 2019, which feels like an eternity ago, that there was a conference where people were in the same room together, that kind of thing. The conference was focused on Alibaba, which was such a fascinating topic. Deborah gave a presentation that absolutely blew everyone away. And I knew I needed to meet her after hearing that. You'll see why. She is one of the most knowledgeable and connected people I know on retail and consumer trends, on supply chain, and on China, all topics that on a normal day would be very important, but in terms of the crisis that we're dealing with now, extremely important. So very grateful she's making the time. My criteria for these Extraordinary Women on Boards gatherings is always that we leave the room or the virtual room smarter than when we walked in, and I have no doubt that will happen. Deborah is the founder and CEO of Coresight Research. It's a research and advisory firm specializing in disruptive technologies, reshaping today's retail landscape. She has a global presence with her firm, US, Europe, Asia, and very deep expertise in the Chinese market, which very few people can claim. So I've asked her before she begins to tell you a little bit about Coresight, because you may find at the end of this presentation that this is access to information and insights and data that you and your boards might be very interested in. Deborah's background is initially as a sell-side research analyst, specializing in global staples and consumer discretionary at Citi. After that, and before founding Coresight, she served as managing director of Hong Kong's Fung Global Retail and Technology, the think tank of the very well-known Fung Group. She was ranked #1 analyst in II for 10 years in a row. She was named one of the top 50 retail influencers by Vend in both 2016 and 2017, and received the Asia Retail Congress's Retail Leadership Award in 2016, and was also recognized, not surprisingly, by LinkedIn as a top voice in retail. She also serves on boards, who I'm sure are very grateful to have her, especially these days, ranging from XL Brands to Guess to Kiabi and Goodwill Industries of New York and New Jersey, and Street Soccer USA. She also is a CPA, excuse me, a CPA. And as I said, a member of Extraordinary Women on Board. So again, thank you so much, Deborah. I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And I assume all of you can see my screen. So we'll run through this deck, and we'll, as Lisa said, we'll make it available to you afterwards. In terms of the opportunity today to kind of run through what we're seeing in China, obviously there's a very interesting environment right now in terms of what we're seeing, how we're seeing it, and what's happening. So today we'll talk about, I think Lisa already did a great job introducing me. I will introduce Coresight, and then we'll talk about, what we're seeing in China and really kind of what some of the key takeaways are. At Coresight, so as Lisa indicated, we were part of the Fung group. We were their think tank, and through that, we developed deep expertise in China and really supply chain, which I didn't have before. Our goal here is to help our clients, really navigate the challenging retail ecosystem. And that can be understanding, we do a lot of east to west like we are today, but also understanding how to work with kind of big and small tech. We spend a lot of time with startups. We have an entire kind of innovator intelligence vertical, if you will. What we do there is we've done projects for major corporates around the world in terms of helping them identify their pain points and then finding the startups that are a good fit. We do a lot of events like these, and then our advisory business has typically been global, basically cross-border e-commerce. So we take U.S. companies to China. One of the very well-known ones was Kroger, and we work with many luxury and specialty brands as well. And what has been interesting in the past 12 months is we've started to work with many non-US based companies, helping them come to the US. So this kind of idea of global cross-border in each direction. Right now, we are helping many in the grocery space because obviously there's a lot of challenges there. We have a data science team and helping them understand. I mean, this has been really interesting. A typical grocery store carries anywhere between 50,000 and 60,000 SKUs. And with the challenges around supply chain, what would be the 3,000 SKUs that they should carry? And because sometimes, right, of that, kind of cross-purchasing behavior, really understanding, kind of consumer behavior and what matters, right? I mean, cookies and milk are an easy example, right? Carrots and hummus, but those types of things are really critical. And then from a research perspective, I would say nothing's off the table. I'm very curious, and so is our team. We have many PhDs and data scientists and engineers on the team, and we really try to kind of ask questions of ourselves that we think our clients would like to know. One example is we did a webinar last week, and someone was asking us about kind of virtual reality and augmented reality and how that was changing. While we have clients who are in that space, it was actually a great opportunity for us to go back and write a report. So let's get started. For lack of a better way to put it, this idea of kind of the domino effect and what's happened, just to kind of put everything, I love timelines. Anyone who's read our research or knows me, this has kind of been one of my hallmarks. For me, I'm very visual, and I like to see things. And my career prior to Citigroup is I was very honored to work with Barton Biggs and Byron Wien as part of Morgan Stanley's global retail strategy team. And that helped kind of, I like to put together frameworks because it helps simplify the complicated and make sense out of the chaos. But what we saw here, right, so it really helps us in terms of just the timing of everything. And we saw everything really from a Coresight perspective right around Lunar New Year. And that led to many complications for China because, right, that's really the largest movement of humans once a year. And, everyone kind of goes home or travels and goes on vacation. And so they were dealing with kind of complications on top of complications. And if you kind of just spend some time looking through the dates and what happened, I think February 20th I want to focus on. So this was, let's say, a month and change after everything was started. But I think some of the challenges we're having right now in the US is that we have 50 states with 50 different governments. And here you see the provincial government started to roll out a health code system to track at-risk individuals. This was done through WeChat. And so you would kind of, through a code, actually, I have WeChat on my phone, and it asked me to kind of fill out where I had been and kind of, other personal questions. And so they were able to then identify you. It was like red, yellow, green. And so you could go into like a retail establishment if you had green, and movement was more restricted if it was yellow or red. And that, I think, was a major change in terms of being able to allow people a little bit more physical freedom as opposed to being quarantined. And some of the interesting things during the quarantine were just the amount of kind of, it was kind of like what we're doing, with everyone clapping for the healthcare workers at 7 p.m. every night. But there were also like these, it's pretty cool, like drone garages, and they would send out the drones to encourage people to kind of stay at home, and anything to, just kind of better help people better understand the severity of what they were all dealing with. If we look at April 8th, which is obviously right around the corner, China is going to end the Wuhan lockdown. So really from beginning to end, we're talking of in a very short period of time, really 3 months, we kind of came through the crisis out to the other side. And I'm sure you saw the recent PMI data, we're back to expansion. So there's a really positive story here. And once again, the rest of the world isn't China, although we're seeing, we have an office in India, we're seeing some very similar characteristics to how China handled the crisis, to how India is handling it. And there is a playbook, right? I mean, it's something we have put together at Coresight. If we, kind of look ahead to some of the other changes and how, we're seeing other countries handle this, we are seeing, I would say, more collaboration, and that's been a positive. And here we have the US timeline. What's, considering the area that we sit in, which is really this intersection of retail and technology, and we also work with a lot of REITs. I'd say the challenges have really been, several-fold around supply chain. I do think there were thoughts that we would see more stimulus early in this process. And I think that's why you saw this significant announcement of furloughs by the retail sector beginning this week. And at the same time, we had a government who did act early, and I think they felt that was enough, but it's turning out to be a much greater challenge than anyone expected. And this is, I love this chart. So I remember seeing this back during the, kind of, I call it the tunnel in China, when we were all inside looking out. But if you look at the number 2 thing that was purchased, it was the lipstick. And so there was, and we've seen Walmart come out with this idea of waist up, but I do think that we saw, and like the egg beaters, right? Some of the changes were really interesting. And number 10, obviously, I've heard there's a shortage now globally, but in the US, so one of my friends actually runs a bidet company. I'd actually encouraged him to take the role. It's called Tushy, and they cannot even keep up with demand. And it's just it's such a great story. They've been like a very, they're a startup, entry price product, but here are some of the changes we're definitely seeing in terms of purchase habits and, kind of what's changing very quickly. This is also something I wanted to point out, once again, for those of you who sit on a retail board or have spent time with retailers. I, as Lisa alluded to, am very deep in retail boards, as well as our retail expertise in what we do at Coresight. But this has been really interesting, and I'm sure we could have this list be longer. But in China, we didn't see the furloughing or concern over employees as it relates to their job. Many employees were afraid to leave their homes. But what we saw is some really interesting kind of this idea of like co-employment, and retailers worked with restaurants, et cetera, to really solve this kind of HR crisis and to make sure the country was still running. Secondly, not only did the brands there engage with consumers online, and they always have, right, live streaming and gamification, but it was on a whole different level of amplification. And I do think so right now that we're kind of out of the crisis in China, there's a different relationship between retailers or brands and the consumer because they developed it during this crisis. I've been on the phone today with two different retailers, and I said, you know, even if you just put a video, I mean, start small. It's one of the things at Coresight that we always emphasize is just do the minimum. Don't, right? These lofty goals are great, but it can be very stressful and very overwhelming, especially now. Put a video of your CEO talking on the site. Put a video of your employees, you know, from their homes, like, you know, kind of what does the brand mean to them? So anything that can be inspirational, but it should be real, right? I mean, we all need to be real right now. People are, you know, I'm sure everyone asks you how you are. You're like, oh, I'm great. I'm great, but I'm cleaning my own toilet. And, you know, I mean, there's all these other things, but we have to be real in terms of what's happening. What worries me a little in the US is we've seen almost a complete stop in terms of marketing budgets. And I've felt that the person who's the most at risk is a CMO. And that if you're not talking to your customers, if you're not talking to your employees, that could have longer term ramifications and implications. On the real estate side, we saw companies get, you know, kind of subsidies from the government, and there was this, you know, kind of new relationship between the landlord and the tenant, and they work together. And I want to give an example of this. So when the malls reopened about 2 weeks ago, some of the landlords worked with their tenants to have them give away free product. And then they talked about that, and we saw unbelievable traffic, but there was a reason behind that. It wasn't like, we're open for business, come on in. There was a real strategic aspect, but it was about collaboration and partnership. In terms of what we're seeing here, the retailers are flat out not paying rent. And in some cases where I think they're not so overwhelmed, they're trying to work with their landlords. We've seen a significant cancellation in new store openings. Also, some of the companies I work with, they were supposed to be opening these beautiful new stores inside the malls, but they can't even do construction right now. So it's a challenging time. And then lastly, on supply chain, what we started to see in China, which was really exciting, was this idea of more customized product, more personalized product that was very unique, right? Consumers had time to design it. They had time to share it on social media. Look what I'm doing. And I'll run through some of the numbers with what we saw on International Women's Day, but once again, it was very inspirational. And we have holidays coming up. We have Mother's Day, we have Easter, which is around the corner. You know, we've got to get out there and support retailers. I mean, the consumer is 2/3 of GDP. We need people shopping. We need people consuming. And, you know, I understand that our needs are different right now, but that is what's going to kind of pull us out of all this. In what we're seeing domestically, and I'm working with folks on both sides, outside of Walmart, who I want to commend, and we're also hearing very positive, I would say from the off-price, the TJs, the Rosses, the Burlingtons, they are not canceling, they are taking orders, and this will keep, you know, the whole system running. One of the other changes we're starting to hear is this idea of nearshoring. So where you're bringing your, you know, kind of production, your capacity much closer. The reason for that would be, right, we want to kind of shorten our supply chains and shorten our lead times. This leads to all long-term positive benefits around sustainability. You know, you kind of make what you have an idea your demand will be, and that'll be one of the positives I think that will come out of this.
So Deborah, before we go on to the next page, we have a question in the chat as to how this co-employment works. Does that mean people work for multiple retailers versus one, et cetera? That sounds like a super interesting idea. So could you talk about it a little bit more?
Of course. So what we've seen is that, you know, in China, and it was more often kind of a retailer and a restaurant. And so they were delivering product, in some cases to the same person or to the same neighborhood. And this idea that they were then, yes, employed by both and compensated by both. And, you know, and these are hourly workers. So that the frontline workers who we're seeing kind of right now are in some cases the most challenged. That was interesting. But the other thing that I didn't mention previously, which is also interesting around this, you know, as some of the delivery kind of employees may be concerned, or there's a strain on the system, right, where many of us are getting most things delivered, we saw this idea of like micro communities. And so like Lisa, in our micro community, if we lived in like the same block or the same apartment building, maybe you would get deliveries of paper products, I would get deliveries of baked goods, somebody else would get canned goods. And then we would just go to each other's, kind of home or residence to pick those up. And obviously in a very safe way, but there were ways, kind of to mitigate some of these challenges around staff. One other inspiration we've heard from India is a company called Big Bazaar, which didn't previously have an e-commerce presence. In like a period of a week, spun up an entire e-commerce presence. So there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of excitement in terms of how we can work together, but ultimately to get the goods that the consumer needs to the consumer in a kind of reasonable amount of time. These are so.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you one more time just before we go to the next slide. So there's a question in chat that's asking about the level of government interaction and the degree to which that's resulted in the population adhering to lockdown requirements and their ability to start, kind of looking at there versus here. I mean, it sounds like you were tracked on your phone with a risk ranking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, but it's interesting, right? Because what we're seeing in India right now is that the police are, they're on the streets. They're, you're not really supposed to kind of leave your yard, except if you're buying necessities. And there's also limitations around that, similar to China. So you can only leave your house. One person can leave the house once every 2 days to buy necessities. Thereby, you could even, no exercise, none of that. You were, working out at home, right? There was a big boom in, kind of sales of athleisure and kind of exercise equipment that you can use at home. It's not just a kind of the way that the Chinese government kind of helped to, I would say, communicate that, how important it was to stay at home and the social distancing. We're seeing it in India as well. And, there's just police and they're just saying, please go home. So there are different ways that different countries are handling this. Like I said, I think it goes back to the challenges that we've really allowed the states, and it's just, it's the amazing miracle of, right, the United States. We've allowed the states and local governments to have a lot more authority. And, I think in many cases, I hear anecdotes daily and people asking me for advice where they haven't seen the degree that they would hope in terms of people protecting themselves and protecting others.
And sorry, one more quick question. Is China using facial recognition? That's coming through the Q&A tab.
It's, when you go into China, you assume that, and sometimes it's not only for your own safety, but, there's a great story. One of my friends lost her handbag and it was kind of returned back to her. And, there is a degree of, kind of facial recognition technology. It's incredibly advanced there because there are so many AI engineers. And we use it, so, we work with a lot of the retailers in China because you're able to, it's amazing. You can pay with your face, right? I can pay with my face, I can pay with a smile, I can get in and out of, most apartment buildings, or many of them now, it's your face, right? Because it's such a unique identifier. And in a day and age where we're also concerned about identity theft and cybersecurity, it is a way that they've been able to, I'd say, approach that and be very innovative.
Okay.
So these are some of my favorite examples, and I remember the first week that, and I don't think I truly appreciated, although now being quarantined myself, but here we go out, we walk, we have a little bit more flexibility, I would say, in terms of our physical movement. There are all these on WeChat, right, or Weibo. So Weibo is like Twitter, and WeChat is kind of like a super Facebook, right? So it's kind of like Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, all kind of rolled into one. It's a payment platform, and it really is. And then there's mini apps you can sell. Just an example. So we saw all these kind of posts around, right? People were at home trying to keep their home items standing. So broom standing, dollar bills. And I was like, wow, people, in my head, I'm like, wow, people must have a lot of time on their hands. Well, of course they do, because they're in their apartment or their home all day. But these were some of the things that we started to see kind of break out. We also had this idea of like cloud clubbing. And why that's so interesting is in the month of February, we have a ton of data, right, from the, Alibaba and JD and whatnot. So there's a lot of data in terms of consumer behavior. Streetwear was the #1 seller. And, you know, because people were on live streams, right? Like, you know, we often dance by ourselves, and now we're dancing still by ourselves, but with a bunch of other people also dancing by themselves. And so there was like this, it was fun, it was exciting, and it was engaging. And you know, and I think we're seeing that too now, that in this last kind of this idea that movie premieres are now being made online as well, without being first released in the theaters. So we definitely saw some innovation around, I would say, experience and, you know, the consumer. And the other thing that we saw, so for those of you who are familiar with, you know, what's happening and have children at schools, this idea of education, where, you know, you saw a lot of live streaming, but this is where, and for those of you, once again, who have children, you're experiencing this. You know, my kids are on Zoom. A lot of their classes are actually pre-recorded. And what we saw here was, it was live streamed. So it was like true interaction. And, you know, and the teachers were like hosts of a show almost, right? And so like they were saying that this may be a new way of education because the kids were so engaged, right? It was fun. And, you know, so that was, I thought, very interesting. And then there are a lot of mini programs that were developed. So this is off of the WeChat platform, to provide, you know, all kinds of advice, access to doctors, and, you know, kind of to give them opportunity to have live video calls. In some ways, like our telemedicine, just, you know, in a different approach. And then I'm like a huge fan of vending machines. I used to work extensive hours at Citigroup. I could tell you what was an A1 and B2 and C3. So I'm like, I've been passionate. We've written much about vending machines. And what we saw is there was a huge uptick in vending machines. And once again, this all happened like that, being dropped into neighborhoods that had fresh food and fresh produce. So that was very easy, and you didn't have to, once again, leave your block to, you know, to consume healthy food. This is a great example, and, you know, from a live streaming perspective, where we saw, you know, different brands and different, they're called KOLs, a key opinion leader, who sold product. And once it was fun, it was engaging, right? There was a way that we could spend our time and also see what other people thought or what other people were buying. Shanghai Fashion Week, as you can see, they also live streamed. And, you know, that's kind of what we're seeing right now in terms of fashion going online. And we're also hearing a lot more of, there's been this term kind of see now, buy now. And, you know, kind of being able to purchase, if you're a retailer, from these kind of live stream shows. I want to be wary of our time, so I'll kind of speed up a little bit. But surprising trends and the new normal. This was a huge positive, and this is what kind of, I would say, I say these numbers over and over and over again, but during the International Women's Day, which is March 8th every year, just like, you know, we've got Christmas the same day every year, but they have they have really kind of a few key shopping holidays in China. So it's March 8th, International Women's Day. It's 6/18, which is the JD.com shopping holiday, and then 11/11, which is, I'm sure all of us know, is the Alibaba shopping holiday. Last year it did $38.4 billion in 24 hours. And even so, you know, even though this was kind of, once again, when we were like in the tunnel in China, we saw a 200% increase in sales from brands like Lauder, Lancome. We also heard from like Elizabeth Arden, Shiseido, and Lululemon as well. And real positive in terms of, and a lot of that was driven through unique marketing, unique packaging, which always happens at that time of year. This is, you know, we look at these live streaming numbers. I had actually thought that it would be over 500%. We did see the peak day was up 650, just because I know so many businesses who were already live streaming did even more. And there were, you know, there were certainly brands who were new to this, but it really gave us a lot of engagement. And, you know, that was kind of, and then on this page, these autonomous delivery robots, which really kind of came to be about 2 years ago. They were mainly used on college campuses as a way to test them. But this ended up in many cases, you know, where there was a shortage of staff. And let me help on, you know, if I can. The shortage of staff was because people had all traveled for Lunar New Year, and in some cases couldn't get back. And so, you know, there were unique circumstances that led to a lot of, I mean, and maybe it led to more innovation ultimately, but that was kind of the genesis of why we saw, you know, kind of more challenges around delivery than I think we would have otherwise. And, you know, this is, and one thing I want to mention is we saw video after video after video of positivity, right? Somebody dropping off masks or gloves at a hospital and like running away because they didn't necessarily want to be recognized. They just wanted to like do good. And I remember seeing these over and over and over. And not only did it, as a human being, make you want to do good, but it also really drove kind of this positive thread through everything that we were seeing. I haven't, you know, and I arguably I spend probably more time on Chinese social media than I do in the US. But what limited interaction I've seen, I haven't seen that. I've seen, you know, more posts about people's, you know, dogs telling them that they wish they'd go back to work. And so I think that there, you know, that there is an opportunity for anyone who works on, you know, for those of you on, you know, I mean, everyone here is on a board, which is why we all have such a huge opportunity to make a difference. I do think that this idea of communication, it's communication in ways that we haven't necessarily, could really drive positive momentum. So we are seeing this is real data. And like I said, it's really easy to get data out of China. So anything that anyone needs, please just ping me, Lisa. You know, I think my email's on the bottom here, my cell phone. But the first week of March, we saw over 50% of people back at work. And once again, that was like 3 months, is really fast. Financial services sector, almost 100%, and retail 74%. And I keep hearing from many people, oh, those numbers don't seem like they could possibly be realistic. Well, this is the real data in terms of people who are back at work. And we have continued to hear, you know, we work with, I'm on the e-commerce expert for the International Council of Shopping Centers. And what we've seen here is this idea of, you know, what can we do to, you know, when the malls are open, kind of get people back. And I wouldn't say that it's anything that different in terms of our expectations around data. It's just that, you know, they're already open. And then by the last week of March, we saw, you know, Uniqlo, Apple, Starbucks. I mean, people are back at work. I mean, we're basically kind of back to a new normal, which is really kind of in some ways similar to the old normal, since technology is playing such a huge role in that.
But let me just ask you, Deborah, are people behaving differently in the new normal? They may be going through the same routines, but are they wearing masks? Are they more sensitive to being near people? How does that come out on the other end?
There was already, but maybe for different reasons, you know, there was, anyone who's been in China, you know, there's always been a lot of, and you have to think about, which I should have mentioned earlier, we all went through SARS there. And in some ways we were more ready for this virus, and people had already had to change their lives, right? When you go to Chinese restaurants in China, you have 2 sets of chopsticks. One is to take, and then one is to eat, right? So you've got like the white and the black. And there were a lot of things that had already been put in place to protect consumers. And this idea of kind of wearing a mask, and, you know, you use your elbow to kind of hit the elevator button, or, you know, you like kind of pull over your sleeve, and a lot of changes that we had already made. And in some ways, this is like the first kind of, you know, epidemic, and I understand it's a pandemic, but the first one that we in the US have had to live through. And that may be why it was easier for them to kind of get back to work. I would say some of the changes are, I feel like, you know, everyone's a lot nicer to each other, right? There's a lot more patience. And, you know, I mean, hey, I myself have like sent out some emails, and I look, and people are like, oh, I don't think you meant to send that. I'm like, you know, I'm like, I didn't. And they're like, don't worry about it. No, I mean, we're seeing that already in the US, and it's more just like, you know, you're tired, you're multitasking, you forget to attach a file. I feel like there's a lot more patience. And we're also seeing this amazing collaborative change where businesses that never work together or work together just around the big shopping holidays are truly figuring out from like a commerce perspective in some cases, right? Kind of, how can hotels and restaurants work together? How can retailers and restaurants and hotels? And so more of this idea, and I'm so excited to see what happens for Double 11 this year, where in the past, we would see a brand would say, okay, if you buy here, you get entered into a lucky draw here. And the lucky draw being like a, you know, lottery. I feel like we'll see more of that, but also, and it's stuff we should do here, right? I mean, these are great ways to drive interaction and also ultimately sales.
So two quick questions, and maybe you're about to answer them, but one relates to, you know, is there, for example, a continuation of monitoring of how many people are allowed to go into a store? You know, is there sensitivity to crowding in the same way that, we felt here in the quarantine. And another question related is, I know that China was so advanced already with respect to, online retail in such innovative ways with Alibaba and others. But, traditional retailers were already having the challenge of online. So now that there's been this period of time, even if it's just 3 months, that, online kind of ruled the day, does that accelerate the demise of traditional retailers? Is a question coming in the chat.
What's so interesting with China is, right, we still saw under 50% of sales were online. And if you think about, right, if you're in a tier 4 or tier 5 city, you're still probably supporting, local, tier 4 cities are like 1 million people, right? We're still big cities. The supporting kind of local vendors. And even what, to me, what has always been so interesting is Hama, which is Alibaba's grocery store. And I mean, you'd be in there, right? You're like packed in, but the kind of offline to online, they had about a 60% of conversion. But especially when it comes to food, and that's why I've talked to many grocers, this is very interesting, and I thought this might be asked at some point, but I'll kind of volunteer it up now, is most of the large grocers who we've spoken to have said, they're seeing kind of somewhere between a 500 and 700 basis point increase, but you're talking about going off a 2% base, so now you're at 9 or 10. Most of them expect half of that to kind of go back to the physical store once we're kind of through the crisis. But they will definitely have, more than doubled their penetration. So let's say from 2 to 5% are their expectations, and and things can definitely change. The what we've seen from an online retail perspective, I think it's just more fun, right? It's like what we've seen in China, because of this idea of like engaging with the customer. And so more games, more live stream, more giveaways, more, and I talked to a company today who, it was really interesting. They had one of their important customers made like a mask out of a ribbon that they typically tie around the packet, a box that they send. And I said to them, let's do something with this, right? Like, let's put this on social media, but like, let's make a, kind of a game around, can you give out a gift certificate if, your consumers utilize your materials to make masks? I mean, just trying to think about like a way to gamify that and get people engaged and really rally around something right now that matters, which is PPE. And if I'm allowed, I want to take just 2 minutes. We've put together a COVID retail response. We're calling it Retailers United. We have a website, retailersunited.org. We started this literally last Sunday, and it is amazing to me. We've got like the head of Facebook retail and Amazon product and global Microsoft retail, all these, kind of technology companies really helping. And we have retailers and supply chain companies, Li & Fung is part of this, Gerber Technology, all coming together where they never would have before and really working to a common problem. And so what we're trying to do, and I want to call out Li & Fung has actually donated an entire platform called Bashi, and we're going to have kind of the needs and wants and who has product. And so if I'm New York Hospitals and I need 150,000 masks, okay, can you get me 150,000 masks? And then Delivering Good, which is a charity, has also volunteered to move product around. And this all happened in a week. What can we do in 2 weeks? And I think that like we're seeing this here on our soil, and I've been up till like 2 or 3 every morning working on this, but I know that I can make a difference, and I know every single one of us on this call, and I know all of our companies can make a difference. So I think that spirit we're seeing, and all of us working together in a new way around a cause, which I think is incredibly important. In terms of, and like you said, it's probably what I was going to say next. Once kind of everything opened up, it opened up. And as you can see, this is a Chanel store in Shanghai. And, people are back, and luxury, I think, is having a faster snapback than maybe some of the others. But we have seen, kind of pretty much a return back to normal. And in some cases, there is pent up demand. And I do think that will be the positive on the other side is this idea of pent up demand. And we are hearing from many retailers that in focusing on sustainability, as opposed to landfilling or however else they would typically get rid of excess product, they're going to pack it away for next year. And that is also, I would say, it's like an old practice, but it's new again. And really kind of thinking differently about how these retailers are, kind of moving through. So that's it in terms of my prepared remarks. And just, Lisa, if you have questions or if anybody from the audience, I'm happy to take them or take them afterwards.
Yeah, I think the first question is, you know, the name of the organization that you mentioned. Just want to make sure, is it, what did you say it
So
was?
so what we're putting together is called Retailers United with an S.org, and Delivering Good is also the other philanthropic, and we actually spun up a 501c3. I want to call out, there's a startup called Fashwire, and to download their app is $2.99. They're giving us $1 for every download. I mean, you never know where people are going to pitch in. Everyone's trying to do whatever it is that they can, and everyone that I've asked has been happy to help. And you know, I know there's a lot of other organizations also. This is how we think we can make a difference, and just, you know, kind of, you know, I've got, let's put people together, and then let's figure out how to move the product around.
Okay, so anyone who has a question should feel free to put it in the chat. But if I could just kick it off, you know, it would be great if you could kind of give us supply chain 101, and, you know, what to watch, as well as, you know, as you're looking at data, what would be interesting things for us to watch as well, you know, for clues as to things turning or things turning down.
From a supply chain 101 perspective, I'll tell you some of the changes we're already seeing. Well, unfortunately, a lot of order cancellations. But at the same time, you've got some of the brands I mentioned who are stepping up to make sure that they're supporting the industry. We're seeing a huge uptick in digital design, virtual showrooms. And once again, this is much more green because we're not shipping product back and forth, and we can act much faster. But also what we see when goods are, it's called 3D design, when they're digitally designed, and there are different platforms and technology providers. But this also allows more people, right? I mean, all of us on this call, we could look at a design and, you know, comment or ourselves change it. And not only do you have a much higher quality design with much stronger sell-through, you also have taken a lot of time out of the supply chain. So right now, the biggest challenge, and it's probably what I'm spending a lot of time on for different companies, is delivery. And when containers are being sent back to China, they're quarantined for 2 weeks, and goods that would typically, you know, be on the water for 40 days, they're still on there for 40 days. It's just they're being sent 2 weeks later. We work with a lot of freight forwarders who are they're able to find you know, freight, but it's just I would say constrained right now. And even kind of air cargo, we've got we've got 150,000 masks coming over from Beijing. DHL is helping us there, and it's more of a challenge, and especially since many of the global airlines aren't flying, the movement of product and also of people is more challenged. But you know, from a supply chain perspective, there's definitely a lot of challenges, and everyone's working together to solve these. And the other big change is we're seeing, actually this is exciting, especially for those of us in New York, we're seeing, and when this is all over, I'd be happy to take you through some of these factories. We're seeing local factories. So one is a company called Gigi, who typically makes small leather goods, and they're switching over their factory. And these are all small businesses. I mean, people we want to support anyways. They're switching over their factory to do masks. Ruben Singer, who's a designer, he's like designing masks for people to auction off. I mean, right, you're seeing so many people in the supply chain, right, who are, and people are trying to keep their sewers at work as well, kind of what Brooks Brothers has done. I just spoke to Claudio yesterday, and, you know, but we're all facing challenges. A lot of it is around getting fabric right now.
And I guess when we're sitting on boards and thinking about the smartest questions to ask about supply chain, what kinds of questions should we be asking as board directors?
So what I'm seeing is that most people are assuming everything will work like it always has. It's not. And you have to have a backup plan for everything. And even times where I've recently in the past week where I had 2 backup plans for someone, both fell through. So we had to go to plan C. And so you've got to think about putting stuff on the water, putting it on a plane. I mean, hey, if you string it to like a pigeon, but you know, different ways and different approaches. And once again, it goes back to this cross collaboration in terms of finding, you know, kind of space in containers and maybe sharing it with somebody else, you know, which we haven't done. We're seeing a big move to South America, but also domestic. I mean, we're seeing a lot of domestic production like we've never seen. And it's, and so that's where a lot of the changes are. And I would say, you asked a question, which I didn't completely answer, but how do we know when things are kind of going back to normal? In China, you just kind of knew because the news started getting much more positive. There was this, companies were starting to kind of get back to normal and thinking about, kind of design and marketing and in a very kind of move forward way. And once again, I think thinking about 6/18, which is a big JD shopping holiday, how are they going to do their packaging and how are they going to do their marketing? So thinking about, kind of the things we think about every day as opposed to like our response to the virus. There's a lot of questions that came through in the Q&A, so I'll read a few of those off.
Great.
And, what role did COVID testing play in being able to get people back to work and stores reopened? That's actually a great question. And I think due to the monitoring, right, because we have the codes on our phones, and so there's, and people were self-monitoring, right? If you had a yellow or red, you weren't going out for groceries. You would send the person in your house that had green out. And I do think that, testing certainly played a part of it, but it was also this ability from a technology perspective to understand, was I on an airplane with somebody? Was I at the grocery store with somebody, right? You would know that like instantaneously through WeChat. And I think that it was just the transparency of information that allowed consumers and just people to monitor themselves better. So it was a lot of self-monitoring, but with data that was available. Okay, another question. Are there any other geographies besides China where they are post-COVID? And if so, are there any early observations? I mean, Hong Kong, but that's like Greater China. And so let me tell you something that's interesting about Hong Kong is a little over a week ago, they implemented that anybody that didn't get in the country by midnight, and they're not letting tourists, but, kind of residents, et cetera. If you didn't get in by midnight, not only, right, there's this idea of, kind of quarantine at home for 14 days. They actually were slipping on home arrest monitors and, tracking your movement. And if you moved in ways that you weren't necessarily supposed to, there were kind of implications for that. So I think this idea of, this is serious. We have to take it seriously. And, the government does play an incredibly important role in that. And I think that there will be, a continued kind of ramp up in response here in the US. It's just, it's just coming. All right. Given all the attention given to the positive side of lockdown, i.e. decreased pollution, cessation of unnecessary travel, are consumers more interested in sustainable and purpose-driven products and brands? I love the question. Thank you for asking it. In 2020, from a Coresight perspective, our big kind of focus was on sustainability and only sustainability. I would say it was going to be, we plan out our research calendar a year in advance. It was going to be 75% of our research, sustainable brands. What are retailers doing from a sustainable perspective? We were building a sustainability index so that we could, there is something called the Higg Index, but it's for apparel and footwear, but just for all of retail. So, and it wasn't this idea like you're good and you're bad. It was who could we learn from? And what I think has really been interesting is and positive for me, while sometimes sustainability does, there's a cost, what we're finding is this whole new industry of like sustainability tech. So there's a company called Sustain that we've been spending a lot of time with that does recycling technology. And it's like they're doing well by doing good. So a lot of the at a distribution center, right, you have all these boxes. And not only, and they're partnering with Georgia Pacific. So they pay, so usually you have to pay for your boxes to go away. You get paid and you're then kind of recycling the box in a different way. And I feel that we are going to continue to see this idea of sustainability, but I want to differentiate, and this is why this question was such a great one. It's not sustainability for sustainability's sake. It's sustainability for profitability and also sustainability to clean up the environment. And there's so many different definitions of sustainability. And like I said, what we always say is just do the minimum, just do something. And if you do, this year we started composting at home and, working on this, we built an entire sustainability framework, which I'm happy to share with any of you on this call as well for companies and how they might think about it. Okay, next question. What is your sense on return to normal timing for US? I don't really want to answer that, but I can tell you we are seeing companies cancel orders as far out as October. So if any of you have any ideas or ways to make what I'm about to say happen, I'm happy to spearhead. But because in China, right, we rally around Double 11, we rally around 618. You know, Christmas does come every year. Maybe that's an easy place to start. But if we can get the consumer, if we can get retailers, if we can get the government excited about this ideas, you know, and hey, it could be a made-up day, it could be 11/1 or 9/1. The idea of a big shopping holiday, then we all have something positive to look forward to, because I think we need to know that we're going to get through this. We're going to get on the other side, and it will happen, because I worry that we're making so many, you know, kind of draconian decisions right now that we'll keep ourselves like this U is going to be a really broad U as opposed to having any chance of a V because of some of the decisions we're making. And I'm happy to do whatever I can to step up. But that's a challenge. I had originally thought it would be kind of later summer, but based on some of the behavior I'm seeing, I think it might be a little bit longer than that. Is there a way for you and others who are aware of how following the directives allowed China to move up and through the CV-19, it continues to appear that the piecemeal lockdown will delay our ability to move through this crisis? Absolutely. I do think that it's been wonderful that we've all assumed people would listen and not go to the beach and, not go to parties and whatnot, but it's not, we're not there. But I also feel that despite seeing the numbers, we also don't necessarily, there is a severity around this. I'm not sure that we all, and I mean, like we global, like US, we understand kind of just how important it is to kind of stay apart from each other, and how that is the only way that we will all save each other and come out of this together. And it goes back to, I think, more messaging, more videos, more, make it fun. Like, don't make it, like I said, I mean, I want to go back. So literally like week 1 was all those brooms standing up and dollar bills standing up. And I personally was like intrigued, and, anything to kind of get your mind off of what's actually happening. And, I think I've been asked a lot about mental health and, what can we do to help each other? Like every Friday now I join a group of my friends from business school for a virtual happy hour. And first of all, I haven't seen a lot of those people in a long time. And I feel good and positive. And I think some of the other challenges that we're also facing, right, in terms of our ability to think clear, is like work is work and home is work, and having kind of this space. And, the more that I think we can help others through entertainment, I think it's critical right now. And it's not just, Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or whatever you might be watching in your house. It's this idea of, I think that I'm really putting a lot of the onus on the retailers, but certainly others, this idea of how can we create more entertainment and fun for people. All right, another question.
Are you seeing the questions in the chat as well?
I am not. I'm going purely Q&A. So maybe you can do chat and I'll go Q&A.
Okay, yeah, I just want to be sensitive to your time, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I believe as long as businesses automatically go to lockdown versus other options, part-time workers, part-time pay, furlough, et cetera, it'll be hard for folks to think about how to reboot our retailers. Yeah, that is, I think this idea of how to reboot and the furloughing and, somebody said to me the other day, I have to go bankrupt, and I'm like, well, you can't even, because, it's not really an option right now. I think we are seeing some of the retailers who are doing everything that they can to support their staff, whether it's cutting pay by 50% or whatnot. But the positives around a furlough, right, is that, your employee can, I think you need this is my opinion, I think you should continue to pay for their healthcare benefits, but as long as they can be on unemployment and kind of keep their heads above water during that time. But I do feel it goes back to, I think the retailers need to ask for more help, right? Kind of the post 9/11 message from Giuliani was like, get out there and shop. Anything that we can do, and obviously we're not getting out there, but this positive message in terms of how to support retail, so that and the idea being, if you support retail can support their employees. We can drive down the unemployment rate. And I want to say something that's really important to us on this call, right? Because we're women on boards. The frontline workers in retail are majority women. And I feel like, as much as we can support them, it is really mission critical right now. I've seen numbers as high as 75%. So this is disproportionately impacting women. And that is why it is so critical that we get these retailers, however we can, provide insights and information to them to get their workforce back to work.
If I could just interject, I think one big theme coming out of your really interesting anecdotes and insights and data is the degree to which, at least in China, there was a lot of rush to collaboration and a lot of energy put into creativity. And, that just doesn't feel like the mood here. I think that the weight of this is still upon us here. And it's very interesting to go back to our various companies and try to drive some thinking around doing some creative things and being collaborative, which is a form of social good, and seeing what happens there. So there are a few questions in the chat. With many retailers talking about packing away, does this lengthen the manufacturing slowdown for Chinese manufacturers as orders will be more limited for next year's same season? If so, will the global recession be extended?
Well, so we've pretty much missed spring. The feeling is that we'll miss summer. And, the good news is that these are lighter quarters than certainly fall. And so the good news is, if I like silver linings. This didn't happen around our busiest shopping season. But if we, I think it's certainly much more of a positive than driving prices down to zero if we flood the market with product post-crisis, and especially and I think the retailers, I will say, I think that there is this awareness that if coming out of this, and let's say that's, later summer, and we flood the market, then consumers might buy that product and not buy, closer to full price product for holiday. And I think they're trying to balance that. And, certainly it will lead to potentially slower sales in, a year from now. But I think everyone is just working together to kind of get through 2020. And, there will be fallout in 2021, but hopefully we, as Lisa said, hopefully we've got, kind of a creative mindset and, we can work together to figure that out.
There's another question in the questions. I don't know if you can see it.
Okay, so.
I can read it. There's a growing social animosity to Chinese people because of the source of the virus. Can the retail supply chain sustain and recover from distrust from Westerners?
It's a tough question. And, certainly I may or may not be the best person to answer that just because of where I sit, usually geographically and physically, but also mentally. And I do know that some of my staff here in the US who are, Chinese nationals have faced, I would say, animosity, and they've been discriminated against. So it goes back to the government needs to, change their message.
Yeah. I will ask you one last question in the interest of time. So you're obviously having a lot of conversations with CEOs. We've discussed a lot of topics here. Is there anything that is on the mind of CEOs amidst all the things that could keep them up at night that they're asking you about that for some reason we just didn't get to here that would be good to know?
Yep. Cash. It's a number one question. And how much should they cut? Those are conversations. And should they pay their rent? Should they not pay their rent? Like, what's the right thing to do? And how much cash is enough? So we've done. And then the other thing is too, it's interesting, is like, should they acquire companies? I've had that conversation with several folks because there are assets that are available right now or will come available in the next month that they never could have thought about buying, right? Think about it in my world, if you're a large department store and you could use some innovative, kind of spirit from a, D2C direct to consumer brand, is this an opportunity to join forces? So I think the great question, and I'm sure all of us are very proud of the CEOs that we serve, they're asking a lot of great questions. And the answers are tough. I mean, that's why they're relying on all of us. And I think even if we don't and have all of the answers, certainly, and one thing I want to encourage also, is some of the calls I've been on, it's like, you know, think draconian, right? So think if you cut your workforce by this and your sales, like what, because I actually think, Lisa, and I may be, you know, too glass half full on this, I think that's what's going to drive creativity, because that's where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in this crisis. What can I possibly do, you know, to save my company? And like I said, the call I had today was so inspirational in terms of the CEO is going to offer gift cards, and, you know, and he wants to, you know, really use social media to interact with consumers on how have they taken these materials. And he said, you know, they'll send them dust bags and, you know, ribbons with it, which they aren't using right now. And I think it's this opportunity. I mean, we'll be a much more creative culture. I think we'll think about sustainability differently. And also too, I mean, I've personally been reaching out to a lot of my friends. You know, we have like a car in the city, and like, what can I do for you? Can I get groceries for you and drop them off? How can I help? And I do think all of us, right, kind of paying that forward will be what gets us through this. And I think that that's what really helped in China too, is, and I don't expect anything, right? I'm just doing it to do it because it's the right thing for me to do. And I think that as companies also doing that will lead to a very healthy economy once we get through this, and to stronger players. So I'll wrap it up with that. We've got the slides, we've got tons of data, anything I can do to help. You know,
What's a good way for people to track you? Is it to in your newsletter or any other way to follow what you're saying?
Thank you, Lisa, you're the best. So we have, Coresight.com, we have a daily newsletter that we put out for free. That will have, you know, we do have a paywall, but there's a lot of it that's in front of the paywall, and you can get kind of the ideas, et cetera, from that. And, you know, we have a ton of data around this. We also, we're on WeChat, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and very active on LinkedIn. We are actually hosting a daily webinar, and it's really from anyone. We have every Thursday, we do female founders. And the idea is for, you know, leaders in you know, women leaders to provide just advice. I mean, Jackie Lividini, who used to be an executive at Saks, she was amazing. And there were so many questions, I couldn't even get them all answered, because people are really seeking advice on, you know, kind of how to run their businesses and what to do. And I think the more that we can be there for the industry, the better.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much. I will follow up with you on some of the mentions that, you know, are a link or whatever it might be, and obviously send around the slides, whether you attended or not. And, you know, Deborah is a member of Extraordinary Women on Board. So in the member list I recently sent out, you can find her information, but I'll be sure to make that easily accessible. So thank you so much for these insights. I knew this would be a great conversation, and it absolutely was.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you inviting me. Thanks for allowing me the chance to speak.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Be safe.